Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Guila Siegel, and I am the Chief Operating Officer of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington. We are pleased to welcome you to today's discussion about an issue and a cause that has very quickly become near and dear to my heart, the Red Tent Fund. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with the JCRC, our agency is the public affairs and community relations arm of the organized local Jewish community, representing more than 100 Jewish institutions throughout the Greater Washington, D.C. region. Our agenda encompasses legislative advocacy at the state and local levels, interfaith and intergroup relations, Holocaust education and awareness, K through 12 education, outreach and services, and Israel education and advocacy. Over the last several years, the one consistent through line touching every aspect of our agency's work has been the fight against skyrocketing anti-Semitism. Our approach to addressing this unprecedented crisis is multi-pronged, involving working with law enforcement and state and local legislatures to enforce and strengthen hate crimes laws, responding to anti-Semitic incidents, implementation of proactive measures to prevent anti-Semitism from manifesting in the first place, especially in our schools, providing educational opportunities, including robust Holocaust education initiatives, and deepening and broadening our interfaith and intergroup relationships and coalitions. Simultaneously, the JCRC has for decades been a proud champion of reproductive rights and freedoms for all American women, whether in our state legislatures, in voting booths supporting ballot referendums, in our courts, or in the streets. The JCRC has been deeply dedicated to reproductive choice. First, as a core tenet of religious liberty for Jews, whose faith mandates abortion in some instances. Second, as a manifestation of American freedoms and democracy. And third, as the embodiment of universal values of the sanctity of human life and compassion. The story of the creation of the Red Tent Fund encompasses all of these values and principles. It is why, when Allie first went public about the intense anti-Semitism she confronted at the DC Abortion Fund, the JCRC immediately spoke out. It is why we signed on as one of the first institutional partners for the Red Tent Fund. And it is why we are mobilizing our community now to learn about the Red Tent Fund and to support its critical work financially and otherwise. We cannot allow anti-Semitism in the women's and reproductive freedom movements, always present, but perhaps never more brazen than what we are witnessing now, stop us from our activism on what poll after poll shows is one of the most important, if not the most important, public policy issue for American Jewish voters. Women are literally dying because they are being denied critical health care due to draconian abortion restrictions and bans. We must not let those peddling anti-Semitism intimidate or dissuade us from fighting for what we know is right. I am grateful to Allie for having the courage, strength, and leadership and organizing abilities to hold reproductive movement activists accountable for draining support from the cause at a time when it is most needed, and for creating a path forward for us as Jewish women. With that, I'm pleased to introduce you to Tombros Korman, founder and executive director of the Red Tent Fund, and Amy Kaufman, board member at the fund. Allie is a strategic thinker and nonprofit leader with a passion for helping others. From 2022 to 2023, she led the DC Abortion Fund as Senior Operations and Strategy Director until her resignation in response to anti-Semitic conduct by staff and board. Prior to joining DCAF, Allie served as founding executive director of Culture of Respect, a leading national initiative to end campus sexual violence. She has provided management, support, and technical assistance to the United States Agency for International Development and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. She served as the Associate Director of Education for the Association of Reproductive Health Professionals. Allie holds a Master's of Health Sciences from the Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg School of Public Health and a BA from the University of Michigan in English and Women's Studies. She also holds certificates in restorative justice facilitation and leadership from the University of San Diego and executive facilitation from Georgetown. Amy Kaufman is the visionary financial activist behind Studio Watershed, where her passion for social change and financial acumen converge to create lasting impact. With over 20 years dedicated to the social sector, Amy's expertise lies in blending strategy, scalability, finance, and data to drive real-world results. Amy's influence extends nationally with notable collaborations, including with the MacArthur Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the National Network of Abortion Funds, and Tides. Her dedication also deeply permeates the Chicago community, evidenced by her impactful work with organizations like Share Our Spare, LISC, Chicago Cubs Charities, and A Better Chicago. A respected leader in the reproductive health movement, Amy has been instrumental in guiding abortion funds and reproductive rights organizations towards financial sustainability in a challenging post-Roe landscape. We'll begin with a conversation among Allie, Amy, and myself, and then we will take questions. If you have a question at any point, please use the Q&A feature found at the bottom of your screen. I will be able to see the questions, as will Allie and Amy. Should you require closed captioning, there's an icon at the bottom of your screen that you should click. And again, we thank you all for being here. So I want to start off by just asking Allie and Amy to share their story. What brings you here today? What got you to this point where you have felt the compelled to start the Red 10 Fund? And we can start off with Allie.
Thank you so much, Guila. Thank you for hosting this wonderful convening. I'm so grateful for everyone for taking time out of their busy day to come here and hear and learn a bit about the Red Tent. It's funny. I've been experiencing this for just about a year. We're almost at the year anniversary of when I resigned from the DC Abortion Fund, and you'd think that this story would get easier to tell, but my heart is racing. And so I know Amy feels similarly. As you said, I've always worked in sexual and reproductive health. That's been my entire career, and it's something I'm incredibly passionate about. And so I was thrilled when I took the job with DC Abortion Fund. It felt so meaningful to be doing abortion work specifically, which to me just felt like the most pressing issue in the entire reproductive health landscape, given that we were looking at the overturning of Roe coming down the pike and just so many challenges to abortion access. And I was just deeply proud of the work that I was doing at the DC Abortion Fund. And tragically, lots of awful, horrific things happened on October 7th. And one unexpected consequence of, I would say, the impact of all of us of that day was that suddenly my Jewish identity became the most important thing, the biggest elephant in the room, I would say, with my colleagues and board members at the DC Abortion Fund. I've shared my story in Tablet Magazine, online. So I will keep this brief, but just to give folks a sense of kind of how this all went down, after October 7th, it just became nearly impossible to have a conversation with colleagues and board members at the DC Abortion Fund where I didn't feel othered, singled out, or asked to speak on behalf of all Jewish individuals. Something that I think we can all appreciate is impossible to do, especially when you're talking about something as complex as what we were experiencing, what was happening to the world after October 7th, what was happening in Israel. And I felt really strongly that people did not give to the DC Abortion Fund for us to spend those limited time and energy and resources talking about events that were happening across the world. People gave because they wanted to fund local abortion. And I was overridden on that, which is fine. But I did insist that if we were going to talk about these issues, then we also had to recognize that if we were going to talk about reproductive injustice in Gaza, then we had to talk about the reproductive injustices that happened on October 7th. Sexual violence, rape, hostage taking, murder, all of those are reproductive injustice. And so it was imperative to me that if we were going to say anything, that we had to talk about that. My colleagues didn't agree, and in short, things really devolved very quickly. I got I don't know how else to say this, kind of iced out by my colleagues. People stopped taking meetings with me. They started turning off their cameras if I was going to be in meetings with them. And it became really apparent that there wasn't a way for me to be an active participant in the staff if I wasn't going to share their thinking on how or what the meaning of October 7th was. And about a year ago today, I made the really difficult decision to resign. When I reached out to my board chair to let her know that I was resigning, her response was not one of, we're sorry, we think you're a leader in this organization. We promoted you in this organization. We're sorry to see you go. Her response was, I understand if the DC Abortion Fund is no longer a fit for you. Amy and I will talk a bit more about kind of other experiences we've had in the abortion movement space since that time, but my story is just one. Unfortunately, Amy has her own really difficult story to share.
Hi,
Um,
I'm Amy Kaufman. I'm calling in from Chicago. And as Guila mentioned, I run a consulting firm called Studio Watershed, and I work with nonprofits and social impact organizations and foundations all across the country. And in 2019, I started working with the National Network of Abortion Funds, which is the umbrella organization with 100 abortion funds as member organizations. So well before the Dobbs decision, I've been working internally, and because of my good work, was then asked to expand my contract and work with 5 abortion funds on the East Coast, and the DC Abortion Fund was one of them. And Allie and I became close colleagues and good friends. And then Roe fell, and I was asked to expand my contract once again and work with 100 abortion funds across the country. So was deployed to Texas when SB8 happened, and really have worked in Arkansas, Florida, Chicago, Wisconsin, California, Indiana, really across the country supporting abortion funds, and have grown to be a trusted leader in this space. And then October 7th happened, and Allie reached out. Actually, it was like the day before Thanksgiving, and was talking to me about some of the anti-Semitism that was happening. And immediately my heart started racing as both a friend and a colleague. Allie's one of the best leaders in the reproductive rights movement that I had worked with, and a really respected and trusted colleague. And I thought, oh my gosh, I am a Jewish woman working in this space. And in my portfolio of clients, the National Network of Abortion Funds represented about 50% of my income. And so I should just keep my head down and keep quiet and continue doing the work, because I really believe in abortion access, and was sort of conflicted. And then the posts on Instagram and the social media and the sort of movement letters got stronger. And as Allie mentioned, they failed to recognize the sexual violence or any sort of nuance in the conflict post October 7th. And I became increasingly uncomfortable working in these spaces and showing up to calls with clients and not knowing or feeling safe. And Allie invited me to this group called Jews in Repro, which is a small group of people who work in the reproductive space who were experiencing anti-Semitism and isolation. So these calls right after October 7th were about 10 people on Zoom. We were meeting weekly. Over time, these calls have grown to include over 100 professionals in the reproductive rights space who are experiencing anti-Semitism. This is OBGYN providers, clinic directors, policy researchers, financial activists, and of course, Allie. So this issue of anti-Semitism in reproductive rights is pervasive. And as Allie mentioned, we are just 2 data points. So Allie then decided to create the Red Tent and called me and said, I'd love for you to be on the founding board. And would you serve as the treasurer? And I hemmed and hawed and really thought about it, just given my what was happening in my professional world. And I said I would do it. And within a week, I got an email from my client at the National Network of Abortion Space calling me into a meeting. And I showed up on Zoom, and there were some pleasantries. And then she asked me if I had heard of this new Jewish abortion fund. I said yes. And at that moment, I felt like I was going to throw up. I knew what was coming. And she asked me if I was involved. And I said, I'm not sure why this is relevant to my work. Like do this outside. And I said, yes, I know Allie really well. We're colleagues. And she said, what is the nature of your involvement? And I said, I just answered like, yes, I'm involved. And at that moment, she told me that our values are no longer aligned and my contract would be revoked. So a 5-year client representing 50% of my income was immediately taken off the table. And since that time, I have doubled down my efforts, and I am more committed than ever to reproductive rights. I had a final meeting with the National Network of Abortion Funds where I called them out on their anti-Semitism. I told them that holding an American Jew accountable for the actions of a foreign government is in fact the very definition of anti-Semitism. And I told them that if they ever wanted to continue this conversation and work in solidarity, that is my purpose, and that I am leaving the door open to having conversations of people who want to work in reproductive rights with all marginalized communities, including Jews. And Jews have been at the forefront of reproductive rights since this movement began, and we will continue to be, and we will continue to work hand in hand with all people of religions and faith, and including Jews. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm more committed than ever to working with the Red Tent. Guila, I think you're on mute.
Indeed, I was. My apologies. Thank you both. Thank you for your bravery. I know I speak for everyone in saying we're sorry that you've had to endure this. Can you, Allie, just talk very briefly about how the abortion funding movement has continued to respond to the Red Tent Fund as you have launched and now are well underway?
Absolutely. I wish I had better news here, but I just don't. I think the response, I know the response from the abortion funding movement has been extremely negative, extremely harmful. Aside from little things like people going on our social media and saying terrible things or coming after people who are supportive of Red Tent on social media, I've got thicker skin than that. I think the bigger concern is that a lot of these funds have made it really, really clear that they are not interested in working with us, that they are going to put the politics of this issue, the Middle East, above what is really most important in this work, which is abortion seekers and their needs. Amy, I think, did such an incredible job. I had the good fortune to read her statement, and it really, that she shared with NNAF, and it really was so beautiful, the way she left the door open for conversation and dialogue. And sadly, they didn't, take her up on that. And just this week, I signed on to a webinar that was hosted by the National Network of Abortion Funds, again, the umbrella organization that really almost all abortion funds are part of. It was an open meeting. I decided to attend because I wanted to hear what they were talking about, which was what are the plans for their movement, for their funds for the next year. And within 15 or so minutes, I was removed from the meeting and by the moderator, and my Zoom was shut and I wasn't able to join back. So I think that says a lot about the response that we're getting from the rest of the abortion fund movement. I am really pleased to say that we are not getting that same result from abortion clinics. Abortion clinics have patients to see, someone needs to pay for the care, they pay for the abortion procedures. And so every abortion clinic that we have spoken with has been grateful that we're in the space. They're glad that there's another resource that's here to support abortion seekers, and they've been eager to work with us.
That's fantastic, and it's a great segue to moving from the darkness to the candles that you are lighting at the Red Tent Fund. Maybe can you both explain a bit about how abortion funding works? And you can divide up however you want to share that information as you think appropriate.
I'm happy to jump in. Amy, did you have something you wanted to?
I just wanted to add a little bit about, Allie mentioned like the response was pretty negative from the rest of the abortion world, but I would say just on the previous question that our response from the Jewish community has actually been incredible. Allie and I spoke at probably 400 people when she was in Chicago over 7 events. And it was a packed house at every single event, like people standing in the corner just to get in. So I think the response has been unbelievable. And I would also add that our response is not just within the Jewish community. We have been in conversation with Catholics for Choice and other faith-based movements who are actually really excited about our plans for expansion. So that was the only thing I just wanted to add, just like ending on a positive note.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy. Sure, I'm happy to give a very brief kind of overview of how this works. I think abortion funds are something that have been spoken about, which I'm thrilled about, much more since the overturning of Roe, but there's not a lot of visibility into how the work that we do gets done. Abortion funds exist so that people who cannot afford the cost of their abortion care have a resource, a financial resource to turn to. Abortion funds raise money, whether it be from individuals or foundations or whatever the constituency, so that they can turn around and use that money to pay for abortion seekers' care in any number of ways. The primary way that folks find out about abortion funds is when they're actually going to make an appointment for abortion care. They may speak with a healthcare provider or an intake person on staff who talks to them a bit about what the cost of care will be, and then will likely follow up with a question about if that cost of care is something the patient can afford. And if the answer is no, which is so often the case because abortion care is expensive, it is in many, many states not covered by insurance. And most average Americans don't have a couple hundred or even a couple $1,000s laying around that they have ready for an emergency, let alone one for, emergency healthcare. And so when and if the patient says no, they don't have the funding, they will often get referred to either a national or a local abortion fund. So the patient will then call one or more abortion funds and share information about what the cost of care is going to be, where they're being seen, and if the abortion fund is hopefully in a place where they can fund that patient financially, they will go ahead and make a pledge to that clinic for that person's care. And when that person comes in and gets seen, the abortion clinic will turn around and invoice us for that pledge. The other major way that abortion funds get that money out into the world so abortion seekers can access it is through what we call block grants. We're partnering with right now 5 clinics around the country, and we hope to expand that to many more in the coming year and years. But how that works is that we will send a block grant of, a sum of money, $5,000, $10,000 to an abortion clinic. And when that patient says, I don't have the money to pay for my care, the clinic can say, that's okay. We have a fund and, we have funds internally available through the Red Tent Fund or other abortion funds, and they can draw down on that grant to pay for that person's care. And then they follow up with us and say, okay, we've, drawn down our grant. It's time for another grant. And hopefully we are in a position to keep funding those clinics and funding them more. So those are the two main ways that abortion funds get the money out into the world so that people can get the care that they need.
And can you talk a little, either you or Amy, talk a little bit about the reciprocity issues, how abortion funds work together, typically in this space?
Yeah, so abortion care, as I was saying, is quite expensive. Even in first trimester, you could be looking at a couple $100s. And as you get later in gestational age, those costs only increase. And so often, patients are looking to fill a really big financial gap. And abortion funds, because we work on shoestring budgets and because we're trying to get every dollar out the door for abortion seekers, we don't always have a couple hundred or a couple $1,000s that we can put towards one individual patient because we are trying to support so many people. So in an instance like that, you might have what's called a solidarity pledge. And that is when the cost of care is really high and multiple abortion funds will chip in towards the cost for one patient. It's really common. It happens a lot in the abortion funding movement. And as Guila and Amy and I have had the opportunity to discuss, I think the rubber is really going to meet the road here when it comes to solidarity pledging. Red Tent Fund has committed that for us, the most important thing is abortion seekers and their needs. And we're never going to put the politics of a fund who doesn't like us or who said, signed on to a letter that we deeply, deeply disagree with or find offensive, take precedence over the person's need for care. So if we get approached for a solidarity pledge and, any number of abortion funds who've signed on to these really problematic letters are on there, we're going to pledge because that money is going to the patient, and that's the most important thing. We hope that when the time comes, when we are in a position to put our name on a solidarity pledge, I think it'll happen anytime in the next couple of weeks, that when that solidarity pledge makes its way onto other fund stuff, that they continue to choose to fund that patient, even if they see we are on that, because I think that's really a testament of our values and it's a test of, are we really putting abortion seekers' needs above all else, as we should be?
And I just want to add that the Red Tent funds any abortion seeker or patient that needs funding. Even though we are rooted in Jewish values, we serve the entire community.
So, Amy, can you talk a bit about how Jews can support the Red Tent Fund? What can people on the ground do? We have seen such an incredible amount of interest and real passion surrounding what you have worked on. How can average people in the community be of support?
First of all, we would love to get you involved. So lots of different ways. And Allie, fill in where I forget. Sign on to our mailing list. We definitely want to keep you involved. So just to give you some perspective, we just launched in July. So we've been up and running for just a few months. And like Allie said, we have memorandums of understanding and are working with 5 clinics already and are already funding patients out the door. So we have like a very shoestring team. We have 2 staff and 3 board members. So we need lots of support, and that starts with financial support. So I'm the treasurer, so I'd be remiss to tell you to not start with the money, but we definitely need funding to grow and to show up as a really powerful voice. The second way is through congregational support. So we are looking to build about 100 congregations is our goal. And that means that your senior clergy or your board president has said, this organization is in alignment with our values, and we are going to sign on as a congregational partner. Allie will put that link in the chat, or you can go to our website and find out more information. We are a remote organization. Allie's in DC. I'm in Chicago. We have board members in Atlanta and Philly. And we are looking for additional board members. So if you're interested, we're trying to expand our board. And we are also looking ahead to 2025 and doing a national tour. So the cities that we are targeting are LA, Atlanta, New York, and we're working on our fourth city. And so if you have connections or people who are super connectors in those particular cities, we would love to connect and hear from you, because as we go into those communities, very similar to what we put together in Chicago, we lined up like 2 powerhouse days where, I don't know, Allie, we had like 8 events those days to really maximize our time and to try and get in front of as many people as possible. It doesn't mean that we don't want to connect with you if you live in Nashville or Madison, Wisconsin, or anywhere else, but that's where our efforts are. And I don't know, what else did I forget?
Oh, you hit all of it. Norma, I dropped a link in the chat. If you're comfortable sharing that with everyone, that takes you to our Get Involved page, which is kind of a shortcut way to do all of the things. It has a link to our donate page. It has a link to language that you can use to ask your synagogue to become a congregational member. It has a link to a page where you can grab language to share the red tent with friends and family members. Amy and I talk a lot about how the Jewish community has been really the Red Tent Fund's greatest strength. The word of mouth has been truly what makes all of this possible. People sharing this with aunts and cousins and, family members and clergy. And so we just ask that you, keep that chain going and share this information with others. As Guila, or excuse me, as Amy also mentioned further up in the chat, there should be a link to sign on to our mailing list. And we encourage you to do that. That is the best way to hear about ways that we're getting the word out now and moving forward. So we ask that you do that. Thank you.
Well, the JCRC here in our community will be sending out information to all of the synagogues to give them information about how to sign on and be supportive. And it will be great if rabbis and board members hear from congregants about why this is important. We will be posting the recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel and pushing that information out as well. And I can tell you that just in wearing my personal hat, although my personal and professional hats seem to be pretty indistinguishable these days, a friend and I are hosting a webinar on Sunday night just for friends and family, just to have Allie come on and talk to them about this issue. We have people from both locally from DC and from around the country who are signing on. And we're also doing a brunch. We really just need to get the word out. And you are all an integral partner for us in doing that. I want to get to all the excellent questions that are in the Q&A. I want to start off with one, though, that I have been asked several times. And it's not necessarily only a question for you, it's for all of us to be answering, which is that as we do things that, like creating parallel structures that will create opportunities for Jews to be engaged in the work that we're passionate about in a safe, respectful space, because we are not finding that safety and respect in general spaces. Are we hearkening back to earlier generations where there were separated Jewish institutions? And are we ceding space by adopting this strategy? What are the pros and the cons?
I mean, this is something, well, Amy and I talk about this a lot. So, Amy, I'd love to have you really jump in. But I think we talk a lot about how this is a space that historically Jews have been so incredibly involved in and leaders in. And when I really came down to, why I created the Red Tent, I didn't feel like people should have to choose between their Jewish identity and their support for abortion access. So I guess in short answer, no, I don't think we should see the space. But Amy, I know you have a lot of great thoughts on this.
I mean, I feel like we could talk for the next 20 minutes about this and just scratch the surface. We would actually love to be in the other spaces. Allie and I have been pushed out. I think there's incredible like factions and silos, and the fact that there's all this solidarity funding um, is sort of testament to how fractured and broken the abortion system is behind the scenes. Like, in order for one person to get funding for a very complex medical procedure shouldn't be that complicated. And so I think adding an additional organization, we feel like we are bringing more dollars to the field, and actually engaging new donors who have maybe never given to an abortion fund in the past. Do we need a separate Jewish organization? I think right now we do. And like I said, we would love to be in conversation and solidarity with others. It's just this isn't the moment, and it is the moment to continue to push into abortion access.
So I'm going through, there's so many fabulous questions on the chat, some of which you've answered already. So one of the questions was where Planned Parenthood is on this, so not the national abortion funding movement, but rather just the pro-choice movement, reproductive freedom movement. Have you gotten any support from those organizations? Are they neutral? Are they ill-informed? Or are they hostile?
Yes. I would say that there are tons of reproductive rights organizations that have signed on to what Allie and I view as anti-Semitic letters, and very binary letters in support of what is happening in the pro-Hamas movement. And so each Planned Parenthood has its own sort of social media feed. And I would invite you to kind of look deeper if you're a donor or you care about this. Allie and I have taken the position that we are not calling out any organization in the repro movement, but actually asking you to do your own due diligence on this issue.
Fair enough. One of the other questions was about other ancillary expenses that patients incur when they have to seek an abortion in another state, transportation, childcare, and there's the financial need is so enormous. So does the Red Tent Fund cover any of those ancillary expenses? And if not, who does cover those expenses?
It's a great question. I mean, we talk a lot about how the economics are just one of the many barriers to abortion care, but actually getting to a state where you can get abortion care and how do you get there and how do you pay for it is its own separate set of barriers and challenges. At this time, we do not. What you've described is called practical support. It's those wraparound services like transportation and housing and meals and incidentals and whatnot that go to getting a person actually to the place where they need care. At this point, we just don't have the capacity to do that. It's a huge undertaking to do practical support, but it's definitely something that is on the whiteboard for, in the future as we grow and we expand. In the meantime, there are organizations who are specifically focused on practical support. Bridget Alliance is a fantastic one under great leadership. Apiary is another. I would kind of echo Amy's earlier comment about, make sure you do your due diligence before you decide which practical support organization you're interested in supporting. But they are out there. And we'll be referring people to them since we won't be able to provide that in-house for the near future.
Will the Red Tent Fund be involved in other reproductive rights issues, such as protecting access to contraception?
I mean, that is my whole heart is, I see these things as all incredibly intertwined and connected. And so it's difficult for me to do this work without thinking about the larger components of it. or the larger landscape, I guess I should say, that these things exist in. But right now, we are so very focused on abortion work. We're lending our voice to those issues where we can. I just had the good fortune of being able to co-author a piece that was an opinion piece that was an e-Jewish philanthropy that was done with another Jewish advocate who talks about, whose focus is on pregnancy, fertility, miscarriage, and fertility treatments. So I was delighted that I was able to lend my voice to that. But I think for the most part, we're really going to be trying to focus our limited capacity and bandwidth on abortion access for now. But our hearts are absolutely in that work, and we continue to talk about it and bring it in every way we can.
So another question that was posted was, as a national strategy, should we try to get businesses, especially those with women in the C-suite, to boycott having conventions and conferences in states with draconian abortion restrictions? This strategy worked very well in getting North Carolina years ago not to enact its horrible bathroom law. And I would extend that also to funding for organizations that you say have signed on to letters that you believe are anti-Semitic. I know you talked about us doing our due diligence. Do you think, the DC Abortion Fund has already lost funding from not just from individual donors, but from institutional Jewish funders. What impact do you think that kind of activity is having on the intended audience for those activities? So the national abortion funds all over the country, how can we make aside from the supporting the Red Tent Fund, which is the most important way to make our voices heard, how else can we or should we make our voices heard?
Go ahead, Amy.
I'm happy. I think you asked the first part about will the Red Tent be sort of honing in on some advocacy issues. I think boycotting and speaking out to corporations and conventions is a really excellent approach. I'm sort of echoing what Allie said earlier. We are only a 5-month-old organization, and standing up and building a brand new national organization is like a Herculean effort. And so we are laser focused on supporting abortion access and being a really solid abortion fund right now as our primary focus. So we will lend our voice and support and allyship, but our primary focus is on helping people get abortions right now. And advocacy is not in our 3-year strategy right this moment. I would say we are open, we're opportunistic as things come along, but that's where we're focused. I think you asked some other questions in there too, but I'll let Allie.
No, you actually just teed up a great opportunity, Amy, for us to talk about. I know some folks in the chat have questions about initiatives like NCJW, and I think this is a great opportunity to kind of lead into that. NCJW's advocacy work on this issue, as well as many issues that surround it, is, I don't want to say unparalleled because we're in the company of amazing advocates here, but they have been absolutely leaders on this issue. And I really don't know that there is a Red Tent Fund if there was an NCJW kind of laying the path for these many years and bringing this conversation about Judaism and abortion to the forefront. So I'm so grateful for them. I think, Guila mentioned JCRC was one of our very first organizational partners, as was NCJW. They signed on to say they believed in the work that we are doing. And I'm so grateful for that, because both of your organizations were able to open up so many doors for us. I think an important distinction kind of that between the work that Red Tent and NCJW does is, I think of NCJW as kind of, on the 30,000-foot level, if you were, advocating and doing advocacy work and engagement work on so many different issues, this issue included, and doing those tremendous campaigns that bring attention and awareness and action to them. We fall kind of, I would say, more at the base of the funnel in the direct service part of the work. We are here engaging with clients and with callers and directly funding abortion procedures. And so, if you think about kind of the work that all of us are doing, I think of NCJW as kind of, that 30,000 foot, and we're down here kind of really in that local community or multiple local communities doing the direct service work with patients and providers. So I hope that's helpful for those who may have those questions about the relationship between Red Tent and NCJW.
Right. And I will add that when the tablet article came out, JCRC worked directly with NCJW to formulate a response. And somebody had asked in the questions whether JCRC has attempted to reach out to the abortion funds. So the short answer to that is yes. And they were really not interested in engaging. And that was very disappointing, but unsurprising. And so we went ahead, we waited several days before we issued a statement criticizing the DC Abortion Fund. And I think it needs to be said that it wasn't only Allie's direct experiences. The DC Abortion Fund also signed on to a boycott of Matisyahu, who is an American Jewish star, hip hop and musician. And there was a concerted effort to boycott his shows on a tour that he did around the country, including being here at the 930 Club in DC, which again, the JCRC strongly opposed. The show wound up being sold out. But targeting a performer just because he has performed in Israel, that's anti-Semitism. That is bigotry. And so when I engaged with an employee and representative of the DC Abortion Fund, that was the point that I made. I think, and we have had this issue in coalition spaces several times since October 7th. Our first recourse is always to engage in communication, always to reach out. And in some instances, it has been successful, and in some instances, we have not had a partner on the other end. And we will continue doing that. We will continue to try to keep the lines of communication open, to try to engage in conversation that helps to open people's minds about the complexities of this situation, of the incredible amount of misinformation and disinformation that is out there, and about why advocating for the exclusion of Jews from social justice spaces is both not noble and also very destructive. That's one of the most aggravating things about this, is that we are at a crisis moment, and we have been since the Dobbs decision, and we really don't know what the results of the elections last week will hold in this space. So I really think that and I'm beginning to see a little bit of a pushback. Slate magazine did an article about the controversy regarding the Red Tent Fund. And I thought as these things went, it was relatively even-handed. And I usually don't check the comment section. There was something that compelled me to click. I don't know why, but maybe I'm a glutton for punishment. But I was shocked because the comments were overwhelmingly supportive of the Red Tent Fund. And most of the grounds for those comments were, you distracted the movement at a really difficult time. Now you're facing the consequences of that, and you're upset about that, but you really should not have done that. And that gave me a little bit of hope. So we answered the question about NCJW. There was a question about the National Family Planning and Reproductive Health Association. I don't know if that is an organization that you have worked with. And I think the other question, okay, so first, do you have anything to say about that organization?
They're an organization that I'm familiar with from just being in Repro for 20 years. They're not someone I've engaged with in my role at Red Tent. So I haven't done my due diligence on where they've come down on this, to be honest.
Another question was, as many progressive organizations gear up to live again in Trump's America after the election, do you hear from colleagues in other worlds, immigration rights, gender equity, racial issues that are dealing with the same challenges that you are? Is reproductive rights the epicenter of this divide, or are you one of many? I'm grappling with the intersectionality of advocacy in the years to come. It's a really good question.
I mean, I think we are. I think I don't know this for a fact, but I'd be willing to bet that there is Jews in climate and Jews in law and Jews all, you know, similar to the WhatsApp group that we have for sharing support information, that others are dealing with that same thing. I can also just say that I know that those of us who are in the Jews in Repro group are really struggling with how to, I don't even want to just say gear up for the next 4 years, but really to understand the risks that the next 4 years may mean for this work. I think under the last the current administration, you know, we felt like, okay, there was going to be, of course, a lot of challenges, from states like Texas or, you know, banned states. But we felt like the administration, you know, overall was going to be supportive of the work we were doing. And I just don't think we have that luxury anymore. So I know when we talk to people who run clinics or are providers, it's a really scary time for them. So I know that's not exactly answering your question, but I do think it speaks to kind of what we're thinking about as we think about the next 4 years.
Amy, do you have anything you?
No, I think that's great.
So I will add, as I said, we at JCRC have been dealing with this in a variety of settings. And one of the things that we have done is we've partnered with an organization called Project Shema, which works on empowering Jews to address anti-Semitism, especially in progressive spaces. And we are continuing to partner with Project Shema to train Jewish leaders in our community to feel more empowered in those spaces. So, and one of the things that we have done is we have gone into nonprofit organizations that are focused on social justice spaces to do anti-Semitism trainings for employees and to do it within the context of those progressive values. For example, we trained staff members at the National Wildlife Fund. The climate change and environment movement are unfortunately rife with anti-Semitism. There was an incident last year involving an organization called Sunrise DC, which refused to be on a podium with a National Council for Jewish Women and the Religious Action Center for Reform Judaism, two of the most progressive Jewish organizations on the spectrum, organizations that support a two-state solution, that support Palestinian self-determination. And this was, again, blatant anti-Semitism. So we take that work very seriously at the JCRC because we know that especially in the greater Washington, D.C. region, so many progressive nonprofits have headquarters here. So many members of our community are employed in these spaces, and we understand how isolated and alone people feel. We have also helped employee resource groups, Jewish employee resource groups, to navigate really difficult situations within their organizations or companies. So that's work that the JCRC is engaged with regularly. And you can get on the JCRC's website, which is www.jcouncil.org. You can always email me or any of my colleagues here, and we will be more than happy to help you. One final question that I had was, can you give people a sense of what your goals are for the Red Tent Fund going forward in terms of dollar amounts? How much money have you raised, and how much is needed to really give you the base that you need in order to do the work that you want to do? What are your goals over the next 3 years, let's say?
This is my favorite question as the treasurer. So right now we are super excited. We have raised about $450,000 in 4 months, 5 months, and we have we're doubling that next year. So we will be at we have estimated at $1 million next year. And over the next 5 years, we hope to be around $5 million budget. And the reason it's not just about budget size, it's because we have a goal to work with 15 to 20 abortion clinics around the country, making us one of the largest national abortion funds in the country. So we're really excited about that growth, and we feel like in order to get there, we need national partnerships. So I saw in one of the questions that someone wrote about not just NCJW, but also Hadassah. So we are excited and are starting to look ahead to those partnerships as a scaling strategy. So we'd love to work with Hadassah or Hillel or other organizations that have like a really big national footprint.
And we have already connected the Red Tent Fund to Jewish Council for Public Affairs, which is the umbrella group for all the JCRCs. And we actually invited our colleagues at other JCRCs around the country to join us for this webinar today. So hopefully some of them are on. I cannot stress enough the importance of the goal of making this one of the biggest abortion funds in the country. That is going to speak volumes about this space and about how Jews are treated, not only in this space, but in progressive spaces across the board. So there are a myriad of reasons why we should be supporting the Red Tent Fund. The most important reason is that it's a mitzvah. It saves lives. And that is critical. But in terms of, it's also integrally tied in to our work to combat anti-Semitism and to empower Jewish people to combat this kind of exclusionary treatment that we are getting, which is really unprecedented. We're coming up on the hour. I want to thank Allie and Amy so much for a phenomenal conversation. I want to encourage everybody to click on the link to get on the mailing list for the Red Tent Fund, to look out for further activities that JCRC will be putting together to support the Red Tent Fund, and to consider what you can do in your own orbits, whether it's with your friends and family, whether it's at your synagogue, to help support this very sacred work. Thank you so much for a fabulous discussion, Allie and Amy.
Thank you, Guila.
And we wish everyone a
Thank you
good
so
day.
much.